"Get out of my way," a young driver in an expensive sports car shouted, then suddenly threw a punch that knocked the elderly man to the floor of the gas station. A 72-year-old veteran had simply asked them to wait their turn like everyone else. Everyone was stunned. No one intervened. But 30 minutes later, two military Humvees pulled up outside. The first to step out was a major general in full uniform, who happened to be the veteran's son. What do you think of the driver's actions? Do you believe it was unfair? Leave a comment with the word respect to show that you stand up for honor and justice. Rick Collins' morning routine hadn't changed in 12 years. Every Monday and Thursday, he would wake before dawn, put on his neatly pressed button-down shirt, comb his thinning white hair, and pin his Vietnam War veteran badge to his left breast pocket. The small bronze pin had tarnished over the decades, but Rick polished it faithfully each night before bed. At 72, his movements were slower than they once were, his back slightly hunched from years of labor after the war, but they carried a deliberate dignity. His 2003 Chevrolet Impala, maintained in pristine condition, was his pride and joy, second only to his son Michael's achievements in the military. Rick would drive exactly 4 miles to Jackson's gas station, the old-fashioned place with manual pumps and a bell that chimed when you pulled in, located on the outskirts of Tampa, Florida. "The newer stations don't have character," he'd often say. "Jackson's reminds me of simpler times." This particular Thursday morning carried the first hint of spring. A gentle breeze rustled the American flag hanging above the station. As Rick pulled in behind 2 cars, he noticed several luxury sports cars parked haphazardly near the convenience store entrance. Their drivers, for young men in designer clothes Rick couldn't afford even in his prime, were laughing loudly, drinking expensive coffees, and blocking the entrance. Rick waited patiently for his turn at the pump, then carefully stepped out of his Chevy. His knees protested as always, but he learned to ignore pain years ago in the humid jungles of Vietnam. As he reached for the pump, the young men's voices grew louder, their laughter more aggressive. A line had formed at the register inside the convenience store. An elderly woman with a walker, a young mother holding a fussy toddler, and 2 construction workers in dusty coveralls waited while a group of young men cut in front, ignoring the line entirely. "Excuse me," Rick said politely, turning toward the group as he entered the store. "Would you mind forming a line? There are others waiting to pay." The tallest driver, no more than 25, wearing designer sunglasses and a watch that probably cost more than Rick's monthly pension, spun around. "What's it to you, old-timer?" Rick straightened his back, standing as tall as his frame would allow. "Common courtesy. We're all just trying to get on with our day." The young man snorted and nudged his friends. "Hear that? Common courtesy. Who even talks like that anymore?" Rick's expression remained calm. "I understand you're enjoying yourselves. I'd just appreciate if you'd be mindful of others waiting." "You should mind your own business," another young man chimed in. "You're too old to be telling anyone what to do." Rick noticed the mother clutching her child closer. The elderly woman looked down, avoiding conflict. The station attendant, a teenager with wide eyes, stood frozen behind the counter. "I'm not telling you what to do," Rick said softly. "I'm just asking for a bit of respect." The tall young man stepped forward, towering over Rick's slight frame. "Respect for what?" "Being old." Rick's hand instinctively touched his veteran's pin. "I shed blood so you could stand here and express yourself freely. That's all the respect I asked for." A silence fell across the gas station. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across the young man's face, but it quickly hardened into contempt. "Oh, great. Another thank me for my service speech," he sneered, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why don't you head back to your retirement home and bore someone else with your war stories?" Rick didn't respond. He simply turned to walk away. That's when it happened. Perhaps it was Rick's silence that provoked him. Or perhaps it was the quiet dignity with which the old man carried himself. The young driver lunged forward, shoving Rick's shoulder and spinning him around. Before anyone could react, he threw a punch that connected with the side of Rick's head. The impact wasn't particularly powerful. The young man hadn't put his full force behind it, but was enough to send Rick stumbling backward. His feet tangled beneath him, and he fell hard against the concrete, his head striking the base of the gas pump with a sickening crack. Blood immediately began seeping from a gash on his temple, forming a small crimson pool that contrasted starkly against the gray concrete. The gas station fell completely silent. The young driver himself seemed shocked by what he'd done. Phones emerged from pockets as several bystanders began recording, but not a single person stepped forward to help. He got in my face," the young man stammered, though Rick had done nothing of the sort. Rick lay still for a moment, his vision blurring. At 72, even a minor fall could be devastating. But he'd survived worse, much worse. Slowly, painfully, he rolled onto his side and pushed himself up to a sitting position. Blood trickled down his cheek and dripped onto his clean shirt. He touched the wound gingerly, wincing at the pain but making no sound. The station attendant finally emerged from behind the counter, a roll of paper towels in hand, but he stopped several feet away, as if afraid to get closer. Rick didn't look at the young drivers. He didn't look at anyone. With great effort, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, crisp and white with his initials embroidered in blue thread, a gift from his late wife, and pressed it against his temple. Then, using the gas pump for support, he pulled himself to his feet. Not a word passed his lips. Not a cry for help, not a threat. Not even a glance toward his attacker. Just silence, the same disciplined silence he'd maintained decades ago while waiting in foxholes as enemy fire whistled overhead. A blue pickup truck pulled into the station, and its driver, a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s with close-cropped gray hair, stepped out. He assessed the scene in an instant, noticing the blood-soaked handkerchief, the group of young men backing away, and the ring of silent bystanders with their phones held high. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, striding directly toward Rick. Rick nodded slightly. "I'm fine, son. Just a scratch." The pickup driver, whose Veterans of Foreign Wars cap read Mark Davis, Chapter 4738, looked at the growing bloodstain on Rick's handkerchief and frowned. "That's more than a scratch. Let me help you sit down." With gentle firmness, Mark guided Rick to a plastic chair outside the convenience store. He retrieved a first aid kit from his truck and began carefully cleaning the wound. "I know who you are," Mark said quietly as he worked. "You spoke at last Veterans Day ceremony. You were with the 173rd Airborne in Vietnam, right?" Rick's eyes, slightly clouded with age but still sharp, studied Mark's face. "Davis, you're Thomas Davis's boy. Army Rangers." Mark nodded, surprised. "You remember my father?" "I remember all of them," Rick said simply. By now, the young drivers had retreated to their sports cars, speaking in hushed tones and casting nervous glances toward Rick and Mark. The tallest one, the one who had thrown the punch, seemed particularly agitated, pacing back and forth beside his Ferrari. "I'm calling someone," Mark announced loudly, pulling out his phone. "And I've got your license plate numbers," he added, looking directly at the young men. Rick placed a weather hand on Mark's arm. "No need to make a fuss. I've survived worse in rice paddies across the Pacific. One punch won't change who I am." But Mark wasn't listening. He had already dialed a number, not 911, but a contact saved in his phone. "General Collins? This is Mark Davis, VFW Chapter 4738. I'm at Jackson's gas station with your father. There's been an incident." The young men overheard this exchange, and the color drained from their leader's face. "Collins? The Major General is his son?" Mark's voice grew more urgent as he explained the situation. "No, sir, he says he's fine, but there's a lot of blood." "Yes, they're still here. I understand. Will do, sir." After hanging up, Mark turned to Rick with newfound respect. "Your son is on his way." He was already nearby conducting a training exercise with some new recruits. Rick sighed. Michael always was overprotective. There's no need to interrupt his work for an old man's scraped head. The young drivers grew increasingly uncomfortable, mounting their sports cars as if preparing to leave. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Mark called out to them. "Running will only make it worse." The leader dismounted reluctantly. "Look, the old man got in my face. I just reacted. It wasn't even that hard a punch." Rick remained silent, dabbing at his wound. His silence seemed to unnerve the young driver more than any accusation might have. "Say something," the young man finally shouted. "Yell at me. Threaten me with your general's son. Do something." Rick looked up, his eyes clear and direct. "What would you have me say? That I hate you? I don't. That I'm afraid of you? I'm not. I faced men who truly wanted to kill me, who believed with all their hearts that I deserved to die. You're just a young man who lost his temper." The young driver's aggressive posture faltered. "But I hit you. You're bleeding because of me." "Yes," Rick agreed, "and you'll have to live with that knowledge. Perhaps that's punishment enough." The crowd that had gathered fell silent, absorbing Rick's words. No one noticed the two olive-green Humvees turning into the station until they came to an abrupt stop directly in front of the store, their engines still running, their government plates gleaming in the morning sun. For several seconds, no doors opened. The engines idled ominously. The young drivers froze in place, their escape plans abandoned. Customers and bystanders backed away, forming a wider circle around the scene. Even Mark stood a little straighter, his hand instinctively moving to his cap in a gesture of respect. The driver's door of the first Humvee finally swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 50s emerged, wearing the crisp uniform of a Major General in the United States Army. Michael Collins's face, so like his father's in structure but decades younger, betrayed no emotion as he surveyed the scene. His eyes moved methodically from his father's bloodied temple to the nervous group of young drivers, taking in every detail with professional precision. From the second Humvee, two military officers emerged, a man and a woman, both wearing army fatigues with captain insignias. They flanked Michael as he walked forward, their movements synchronized with practiced discipline. Michael didn't rush to his father's side. Instead, he approached with measured steps, stopping directly in front of the young drivers. His hand rested casually on his sidearm. Not a threat, but a reminder of his authority. "Which one of you struck a 72-year-old veteran?" His voice carried across the gas station, without him having to raise it. The young men exchanged glances, none willing to step forward. Their earlier bravado had evaporated entirely. "Let me rephrase," Michael continued, his tone cooling further. "Which one of you assaulted Richard Collins, Vietnam War combat veteran, recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart recipient, and my father?" A heavy silence fell over the station. Even the traffic on the nearby road seemed to quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The tall young driver finally took a hesitant step forward. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Michael repeated, his expression unchanged. 12 people recorded this misunderstanding on their phones. The security cameras captured this misunderstanding from 3 different angles. Your friends witnessed this misunderstanding. Would you like to try again? The young man swallowed visibly. "I lost my temper. He was telling us to move, and that justified violence against an elderly man who survived 3 tours in Vietnam?" One of the military officers interrupted, her voice sharp with controlled anger. The female captain stepped forward. "Mr. Collins trained half my company in survival tactics last year. Men and women younger and stronger than you sat for hours listening to his wisdom. He never once raised his voice, even when recruits made potentially fatal mistakes." Michael finally turned away from the young drivers. Approaching his father, he knelt on one knee, his eyes softening as he examined the wound. "You're late, Michael," Rick said with a hint of a smile. "I told you those Humvees were too flashy for military work." Michael shook his head, relief breaking through his professional demeanor. "And I told you to stop picking fights with men a third your age." "He didn't pick any fight," Mark interjected. "He was nothing but respectful." Rick raised a hand, stopping Mark mid-sentence. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done." Michael helped his father to his feet. "A medical team is on the way. They'll want to check you for a concussion." "Nonsense," Rick protested. "I've had harder knocks falling out of bed." The male captain approached, extending his hand to Rick. "Mr. Collins, it's an honor to see you again, sir. We were conducting joint exercises with local reservists when we heard what happened. Captain Martinez, and I insisted on accompanying your son." Rick clasped the officer's hand. Captain Wilson, still keeping my son out of trouble, I see. Captain Wilson smiled, trying to, sir, though he makes it difficult. Michael turned back to the young drivers, his expression hardening once more. I'll need statements from all of you, separately. Captain Martinez will take your information. The young man who had thrown the punch stepped forward again. Sir, I'd like to apologize to your father. I never meant to. Save it for the judge, Michael interrupted. Assaulting an elderly person is a felony in this state. Rick placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Michael, a moment. The two men stepped aside, speaking in low voices. The gathered crowd watched as Rick gestured emphatically, while Michael shook his head repeatedly. After several minutes, Michael's shoulders slumped slightly in resignation. They returned to the center of the scene, where the young drivers stood in a line, their IDs being checked by Captain Martinez. My father, Michael announced, has declined to press charges. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. The young drivers exchanged looks of disbelief. However, Michael continued, raising his voice slightly to quiet the murmurs, this is still a case of assault witnessed by multiple people. The county will pursue charges unless an alternate resolution can be reached. Rick stepped forward, his small frame somehow commanding the attention of everyone present. Young man, he addressed the driver directly. Do you know what we fought for in Vietnam? The young man shook his head, confused by the question. Freedom, Rick said simply. Not just for Americans, but for people we'd never met. People who didn't look like us or speak our language. We believed every human deserves dignity and respect. He paused, touching his veteran's pin. I don't want you punished. I want you to understand what this pin represents. 1 month later, Jackson's gas station was renamed Veterans Corner. The young driver completed not 60, but 200 hours of service with the local VFW chapter and is now considering military service himself. This story reminds us that respect isn't just about age. It's about honoring the sacrifices others have made. Has someone ever underestimated you because of how you looked? Have you witnessed disrespect toward veterans or elderly citizens? Share your thoughts in the comments below with the word respect to show you stand for dignity and honor. If this veteran's courage inspired you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of everyday heroes standing their ground.